It's 10:38 in the morning on Saturday, July 8th, 2023. I've just moved them into the third cell of this first section of this rotation that started yesterday on July 7th. They took shelter under the tree here, it looks like. You can see they're watering the tree here. I counted the cows, there's 28, there's supposed to be 30. But I did see there's a tree there next to the pond. I did see a cow there earlier, now it's gone. Maybe it's still there, I just can't see it very well because of the contrast. But I left this wire here, it's open. Here, I'll point to it. It's open over there. And that's the beginning of the section. And there's a path that goes down around the pond, and there's a gate back there. And that gate gets big to the back 20. So there might be some cows back there in the back 20. I'm looking at this cow. And her bag is not empty. Her bag is getting bigger. That just doesn't make sense to me. Is she pregnant? Maybe she's still nursing a calf that's still drinking off of her. Because I haven't really weaned the calves at all. So yeah, we got some manure patties of different kinds. We got nice watery ones. We got ones that are piling up. Just a piece of metal. It's an old hay ring, I think. But the grass in places is thin. Like here under the tree, there's some sheep droppings. The grass here is pretty thin, looking pretty scraggly. You can see the ground and everything. But out there where the sun is, and I don't want to go right now, it's 80 something degrees with 70% humidity. It just started raining, just sprinkles like Seattle rain, except the rain didn't stay on the ground, it just evaporated. So like my boots are dry. I changed to rubber boots because I didn't want to get my leather boots wet, but that was pointless. Here we go, here's some manure being formed. Circle of life. Let's take a look at what she made for us. Look, the flies just swarmed the manure patty to lay their eggs. So that looks like good manure. One of the sheep had runny stool. She has like green coloring on her butt. Yeah, one of the sheep over there. So she probably has runny stool. I don't know what that's caused by. It could be parasites, worms. I don't plan on deworming any of the sheep though. Here, this is an older patty, slightly older than that one you just saw. You can see those holes in there. That's made by the dung beetles. They go in there, they make holes, and they take the manure out. They actually suck out the liquids and dry it out quicker. And I don't know what they all do with it, but I believe they burrow into the ground and bury it. That's where they lay their eggs. That's a dung beetle. It's flying. They like to fly, I guess. Yeah. So like here, this is where I dug the trench. It really hasn't recovered yet. Or is it? Is it just part of the grass? This is where I dug the trench. You can kind of see the divot or the dip in the grass. So, yeah. It's a beautiful day. It's a warm day. Humid day. Beautiful nonetheless. Oh, the grass here is even thicker in some places. Let me show you. So I can kind of attribute this part of the field to the extra fertilizer we got from my neighbor, who's just slightly uphill from me. He kept horses in a pen there. And so this was always slightly more green, but the further you get away, the less I attribute it to the runoff. And I think this is just a good piece of ground now. Like, look at this. It doesn't look like much, but let me reach down and show you how deep that is. Do you see that? Let me give a side view there. So that's like 2 feet. 2 feet deep to the ground. Just thick summer grass here. This looks like it might have been an anthill at one point. And I do see lots of grasshoppers. I don't know what they're eating. Oh, they're eating goatweed. You can tell they're munching on the goatweed. Well, the grasshoppers like goatweed at least. You know? My theory with the insects is that they will eat the plants that aren't doing well. And then they create manure, just like everything else. They're actually a food source for other animals. They'd also create manure, so it's part of the cycle. Yeah, so here the grass is still pretty thick. There's some areas. Here you can see this dead area here. Anthill. But you can kind of see how the grass just grows up around it, tall. And the cows are just nibbling at the tips. They don't want to get down to the roots. The sheep, however, put their heads down. They go all the way down. I had a comment or a thought. I was looking at some other cows and they're not as fat as mine. Phil, you commented that my cows are looking great. Yeah, I think they're looking pretty good. Except 24. 24 is straight ahead here. 24 is still a skinny guy, but doing much better. But all the other cows, I don't see any ribs. Maybe the faintest hint of a rib on some of them, but yeah, 24 is still my worst performing cow. But she's doing okay, she's hanging in there. The theory is this, is that inside the cow's belly, or 4 stomachs, there is bacteria and different things that help them digest the grass. And the theory is that if they're only eating grass, they'll do a better job at eating grass than if you feed them grass with other things. It's kind of like humans. Our gut health is important. So there's actually a medical procedure where they transplant feces from a healthy person and they give it to a sick person. And by doing so, the sick person is able to improve their health, which sounds totally disgusting. But what they're really doing is trying to get that gut health going. And we talk a lot about probiotics. You know, kimchi, for instance. I love kimchi. It's a great probiotic. And on a warm day, kimchi creates a certain smell that reminds me of human manure. It has a smell to it, right? And that smell is that bacteria going to town and digesting things. So the bacteria, the microbes, are a critical and essential part of life. In fact, I have a theory that one of the things that was required to create this earth was the microbiology. And he doesn't talk about that in Genesis 1. But I think one of the reasons why he doesn't talk about it is because Moses wasn't aware of it. And so if he started talking about weird things that Moses didn't understand, it would just be weird. And how would you translate microbes or bacteria from ancient Hebrew to modern English? How would that survive? It wouldn't. And so he didn't talk about that. He just talked about all the bugs, the insects, and the birds and the fishes, the things that they did know that would translate. But the point is that all life was created and it all has a purpose. And that includes the microbes. If we were to sterilize the world, it would die. And the only way to recover it would be to inoculate it again. So that's something that I think about a lot. I don't have a microscope. I probably should get one, just to start looking at the stuff that's in the soil. One day, maybe 10 years from now, if I get really, really bored, I'll start digging up soil samples and looking at the microbes in there. But I think that's an important part of the health. There's G.K. Chesterton. There's a quote attributed to him that basically says, if you come to a fence that's in your way, don't knock it down, or don't modify, don't build a gate until you understand what the fence is for, right? If you don't know what the purpose of the fence is, don't touch it, right? And that's in reference to institutions and cultural practices that have been passed down from our ancestors to the modern day. And if you don't know why they were doing that, then don't change it, right? Seek first to understand why they did what they did. There's a story that I like to think about too sometimes. I don't know where I read this or heard it, but the story basically goes like this. There was a grandma, and she would always prepare roast beef, and the way she would do it is she'd cut off the tip of the meat and put it in the pan and then put it in the oven. And so her descendants, her children or grandchildren, would always cut off the tip of the meat and put it in the pan when they roasted it. And nobody really understood why. And finally somebody asked Grandma, they said, "Why are you cutting off the tip of the meat?" And she said, "Because my pan is too small." That's the only reason she cut the tip off the meat, was because the pan was too small. Once you understand why she was doing it, then they could say like, "Oh, well, I guess we don't need to cut the tip of the meat off. You know, it doesn't do anything for the flavor or anything of that." You know. At the same token, you ask, like my wife asks my mom, my mother-in-law, why do you add such and such an ingredient to certain dishes? And sometimes the answer is because it tastes better, but oftentimes the answer is because it's good for you, you know? That's kind of the point of the dish, is to get these things inside of your belly in a way that tastes good. So, and if you just go and just start dropping things because it's hard, or the ingredients are difficult to source, you know, you might be missing out on a lot of things that your ancestors had that you don't have, right? So you have to understand why they were doing what they were doing before you start changing things. And I think that comes with farming practices too. If you're gonna say, "I'm not gonna do any fertilizer," you better understand why they were doing fertilizer in the first place and have an answer for it, right? And in my case, the answer is, it's a lot of money. Fertilizer isn't cheap like it used to be, but also fertilizer is destroying the soil biology. That's something we didn't understand back then. We didn't think about the microbes so much. My grandma would prefer to buy powdered milk to feed her babies, my dad and my uncles and stuff. And she did that because she thought it was more sanitary. But it turns out that mother's milk contains all kinds of things that you cannot transfer in a powder form, right? Things like immune system response programming and other nutrients, micronutrients that just are hard to find otherwise, or hard to absorb in other forms. So that's why when we had our babies, I very much encouraged my wife to breastfeed. And she breastfed as much as she could. She didn't produce a prodigious amount of milk, let's put it that way. So it was a struggle, and we had to supplement with formula, but we breastfed as much as we could. And we studied techniques to get more breast milk out and things like that, because it was important to us, because we knew that breast milk had things that the baby needed. And so that's another case where we bucked tradition. But really, when you're bucking tradition, you're going against traditions. So you're going against a tradition that was a violation of some previous tradition, right? So the farmers that started putting nitrogen in their soil, they thought they understood everything about what their ancestors were doing when they did rotational grazing. and when they cultivated the field by shallow plowing and things like that. But it turns out they missed some things. They got some details wrong. So yeah. Anyway, so don't tear down fences that you don't know what they're for. You don't know what the fence is for, don't touch it, right? Try to first understand what the fence is for, what the culture and tradition's for, and then go ahead and start changing things, right? And so I've tried in my cattle operation to maintain as many traditions as possible. I'm just starting out. I'm not weaning. I should wean. I haven't decided yet to feed the steer up to weight or just to try grass, but there's again a tradition that I don't really understand. Need to figure out. That's a big bug. I'm finding like cicadas, at least their casings on the ground here. That sound you're hearing in the background, by the way, if you don't know, it comes from the trees. And what it is there's these bugs, these huge bugs the size of your thumb, and they're sucking the sap out of the tree for nutrients and liquid and food and stuff. And when they do that, they sing. That's the sound they make when they sing. When I first went to Korea, I lived in Washington pretty much my whole life. I never heard a cicada, except maybe in movies, But when I first went to Korea in August, they were so loud you had to almost shout to be heard. And I kept asking, what's that sound? What's that sound? And everybody's like, what are you talking about? Finally, somebody understood it. It's the cicadas. They said, we hear that all the time. It just keeps going all the time. And yeah, that's an ever-present sound. You just get used to it. That bull has some food in his mouth. All right, guys. I'll see you later. Have a great day. Bye-bye.